TVOntario.
Science, a world of surprising facts and incredible wonders. Stay tuned as we travel through the exciting, unending world of scientific phenomena.
Oh no, not another science show.
Yes, it's not another science show. This week's episode, Power to the People.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yes. Over 100,000 cubic feet of water rushes over the falls every second. It's an incredibly powerful sight.
Power, sight. Is that a clue to this week's episode?
Yes, it is. Not only is Niagara Falls one of North America's best-known tourist attractions, it's also one of its largest hydroelectric generating sites.
We tend to take electricity for granted. We use it, we even pay for it. But where does it come from? What does water, in this case the Niagara River, have to do with it?
A lot. Water is the common denominator in our electrical energy production. In a hydroelectric plant, falling water turns the turbines. In a coal plant, coal heats water to produce steam, and the steam turns the turbines. In a nuclear plant, nuclear reactor heats the water to produce steam to turn the turbines.
I never thought of water as a power source before. But once they generate it here at the falls, how do they get it to my house? How does it get from the falls to the walls?
First puns, now poetry. How does the power company know how much electricity is needed throughout the day? And how does it make sure that each of its customers gets what he or she needs?
I made a pot of coffee this morning. How do they know how many cups I made and how much to charge me for them?
This week on Not Another Science Show, we'll look at electrical power, the generation, the transmission, and the distribution.
Do you know that the two largest power fluctuations recorded along the eastern seaboard were John F. Kennedy's funeral and Tiny Tim's wedding?
No. Can you hum a few bars?
Look at the falls.
All commercial electrical power is generated in the same way, by machines that make use of the relationship between electricity and magnetism. When an electric current flows through this coil of wire, a magnetic field is produced. If I move a magnet inside this coil of wire, an electric current is produced. Notice the effect only occurs if I move the magnet or the coil of wire. There's a coil of wire set up in here so that it can spin inside this group of magnets. Bingo, a generator. It produces enough electricity to do some real work, but you can't get something for nothing. I have to expend energy to produce the electricity to light this bulb. If I increase the load, I have to expend a lot more energy. I can do it, but I don't have time or energy enough to produce the amount of electricity needed to light the whole house.
I can spin this wheel by blowing on it, or I can spin it by putting it in a moving stream of water. I can also spin a little wheel by putting it in a moving jet of steam. Anything that converts moving air, water, or steam into rotary motion is a turbine, and all the power company's generators are spun by turbines of one sort or another. The fossil fuel and the nuclear plants heat water to produce steam to spin the turbines. Hydroelectric plants use the force of falling water to spin their turbines directly.
We visited several different generating plants. We thought we'd like to take you on a tour of them by showing you some slides that we took while we were there.
The most common generator and turbine combination spins at 3,600 RPM and generates 500 million watts of electricity.
Lights, please.
Here at Niagara Falls, the units are a little smaller, but there are 26 of them. To give you an idea of how large they can be, this one's at a coal-fired plant in Toronto. This one's at the nuclear facility in Pickering. I don't know where this is.
I think that's Niagara Falls, David. Hydroelectric power was the first system used in Canada, so why don't we start there?
Okay. Here at the Horseshoe Falls, falling water provides the power at hydroelectric stations. Only it isn't the water falling over the falls that generates the electricity. It's the water that doesn't fall over the falls that does the work. Water flowing from Lake Erie down the Niagara River is diverted before it ever gets to the falls and channeled to several generating stations in the United States and Canada. At this particular station, the water is diverted just at the edge of the falls and falls through tunnels in the rock to the station below. Inside the station, the falling water passes turbines, making them spin. Each turbine turns a generator connected to it, producing the electricity. Elegantly simple. This is a model of the Robert Moses power plant in Niagara Falls. The Niagara River is up there. Part of the water from it's diverted and falls down big long tubes to the base of the station. Those big long tubes are called penstocks, and there's one for each generator. At the end of the penstock, the water hits the turbine blades where it spins a generator. Our little hand crank generator had a coil of wire that spun inside a fixed magnetic field. These particular generators have a rotating magnetic field that spins inside a fixed coil of wire, but the effect's the same. It generates electricity. After the water leaves the turbine blades, it's returned to the river, where it continues its way down the gorge. That's the Sir Adam Beck plant at Niagara Falls. Coming down the hill are its penstocks. At all hydroelectric plants, it's the falling water that does the work. And the farther the water falls, the harder it hits the turbines and the more work it does. It's possible to generate hydroelectricity where there is no natural waterfall, though. In some cases, the river is diverted so it falls over a cliff. Where there's no cliff, you can build a dam. That creates a lake above the dam, and the face of the dam acts like an artificial waterfall to give the abrupt drop that the turbines require. It's not as pretty as a natural waterfall, though. If we had enough falling water on the continent, probably all of our electricity would be generated this way.
For those areas that don't have a waterfall, or at least a cliff, there are other ways. This is the Lakeview Generating Station in Toronto. It's a coal-burning plant. The coal is burned to boil water and make steam. The steam that results is used to turn the turbines, which in turn spin the generators, which produce electricity. Some plants use oil instead of coal, but whatever the heat source, the result is steam. The steam produced by the boilers isn't the same as steam from a kettle. Kettle steam is very wet because it's mixed with water. The boilers are designed to produce very pure, dry steam under a lot of pressure. This is a steam turbine. The high-pressure steam from the boiler is directed to the center of the turbine, where it hits a group of blades, much the same way as air hitting a pinwheel when you blow on it. The steam loses some of its energy during this process, so the blades in the next group, moving away from the center, are larger. Larger blades are more efficient at extracting power from the slower-moving steam. This turbine was designed to spin at 3,600 revolutions per minute and to generate 500 million watts of power. Apparently, even one drop of water mixed with the steam will shred this thing to bits. In Ontario, burning fossil fuels provides 1/3 of our electricity needs. And falling water provides another third.
And this provides the other third. A nuclear plant is basically the same as a fossil fuel plant as far as the steam turbines and generators are concerned. The difference is how the water is heated to produce the steam. The heat is generated by a nuclear reactor. This reaction boils water, producing steam. The steam turns the turbine, which spins the generators, producing electricity.
So to bring you this wonderful tour, we used a little bit of falling water, a little burning coal, and a little nuclear power.
Electricity allows us to bring together different sources of energy and use them for a variety of tasks. Like that one?
Hey, where did you get that? That's from my last holiday.
I got more.
Well, that's you from camp. I like that one.
Want another one?
Yeah. That's another one from my... Where did you get them? Oh, I like that.
In order to make the best use of the Niagara River, as much water as possible is diverted from the falls to be used by the hydroelectric plants. Diverting the water is also good for the falls as it helps control erosion. Just upstream from the falls is a river control dam. During the winter and at night, only 50,000 cubic feet of water per second flows over the falls. From April to October, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., 100,000 cubic feet of water per second is allowed to cascade down the falls, so tourists can take pictures.
You may have guessed that all the generators are connected together. You guessed right. This small generator is capable of providing about 1,500 watts. Right now, all that's connected to it is a 40-watt light bulb. This toaster consumes 1,300 watts. That's close to the whole rated capacity of the generator. I'm going to start the generator up, and it'll be running in isolation, just not connected to anything other than the stuff you see here. And then when it gets up to speed, I'm going to click the 1,300-watt load on. So watch the light bulb and listen to the generator when I do that. Quite a sudden load. This effect can be minimized by connecting several generators together. Imagine that this bucket is my generator. When I suddenly switch on my toaster, the level of the colored water falls. It's quite a shock to the system. This bucket needs help. Here we have a system with several buckets all interconnected. The buckets still represent generators. Now when I turn on my toaster, the other buckets all supply some liquid to keep the overall level even. So the actual level change in my bucket is slight. Now that's great for my toaster. But imagine what it's like at 8 a.m. when everyone wakes up all at the same time and starts making toast. Hey, wait a minute. Whoa, hey, we need some control. Hey, let's have some control. Hey.
Electrical power, as we use it, can't be stored economically. It has to be generated more or less as demand dictates. 5 million households all turning on their toasters at the same time is only part of the problem. There's industry, which usually runs from about 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then there's all of the lights that are turned on when the sun goes down. Not only does demand change minute by minute, but there are seasonal variations as well. This center controls more than 300 generators and the millions of loads in the Ontario hydroelectric system. They anticipate the overall need on a minute-by-minute basis by bringing generators online or by taking them off again.
Okay, so New York then is losing energy from you, and you're involved with switching then, and it'll take 15 minutes to switch. Okay, thanks, Joe. Right. No luck. We'll have to sustain this ourselves.
Every aspect of the system is monitored. From here, the status of every generator, switch, and the condition of all the transmission lines can be seen and acted upon. It's a 24-hour job.
Yeah, see, 200 out. 750. And you got 370, 380.
And
You're right where you are right now.
There's a great difference in the amount of electricity needed during each season. In winter, the demand is much higher than in summer. But in Florida, the reverse is true.
Bruce number 5, is he going to continue to load?
In order to help each other out, all of the electric companies on the eastern seaboard are connected together. That means that each electric company has to look out for the needs of others, as well as its own needs. Believe me, they spend a lot of time on the telephone.
Quite often, the generation plants and the users are hundreds of miles apart. So to connect them together, there are tall towers with transmission lines on them. There's a problem, though. If you use a relatively small wire and try to transmit a lot of electric current through it, this is what you get. One solution is to use a much bigger wire, but that's expensive and impractical. Electrical power is measured in watts. You've seen that written on light bulbs and appliances. Any given wattage can be produced by the combination of two things, voltage and amperage.
A volt is the unit used to measure the amount of pressure, or electrical force. An ampere is the unit used to measure the amount of current flowing. A watt is the unit of electrical power. Amperage times voltage equals the wattage. So, if you increase the voltage, you have to decrease the amperage, or vice versa, to get the same amount of watts. To give you an idea of the relationship among watts, volts, and amps, we've set up this little demo. Let's go. In our example, the amount of energy I have to use to push on the seesaw will be the amps.
And the distance between myself and the ground will be the watts. The distance that Judy has to push will be the volts.
Okay, I want to lift David a certain distance. That is, I want a certain number of watts. If I push here, I don't have to push very far to lift David up. That's low voltage. But it's going to be tough.
But
That's high amperage.
now, if Judy moves further down the teeter-totter to get the same amount of wattage, she's going to have to push through a much larger distance. That's higher voltage. But it won't take as much effort. That's low amperage.
So, either combination of volts and amps gives me the same number of watts.
Pardon me?
Watts?
Yes.
What?
That's what you said.
When?
Not when, what?
I don't know.
Third base.
What caused the big blackout of 1965? The big blackout was in fact caused by the failure of a small protective relay switch. This blackout moved along the eastern seaboard from electric system to electric system until the entire seaboard was without power for periods ranging from 7 minutes to 9 hours. The net effect was to set up new controls so that this would not happen again. The other effect was a mini baby boom 9 months later.
It's the amperage that burns up my tiny transmission wires. All conductors offer some resistance to current flow, and it's that resistance that turns electrical energy into heat energy. The more resistance, the more heat. We use low voltage, high amperage current in our homes, but to transmit that would require humongous wires and be ridiculously expensive. So the power company transforms what they generate up to high voltage, lower amperage current for distribution. We can't use that high voltage electricity in our homes because high voltage electricity has a little quirk. It likes to jump right through the air. That's why the transmission towers are so high and the wires are so far apart, and it's also why it's not a good idea to fly your kite near them.
So we have to transform low voltage, high amperage electricity into high voltage, low amperage electricity. How? By the use of transformers. Like generators, Transformers use the relationship between electricity and magnetism, except they have no moving parts. We've seen that an electric current in this coil of wire produces a magnetic field, and that moving a magnet, or this coil of wire, will produce an electric current. A transformer is a combination of the two, but what is needed is to produce the electric current without moving either the magnet or the coil of wire. If we could get the magnetic field to move, we'd be in business. That's where alternating current comes in. You may already know that our power is 60 cycles per second alternating current. That means the current changes direction 60 times in a second. Transformers are the reason why. Alternating current in this coil of wire produces a moving magnetic field in this ring. The moving magnetic field produces alternating current in this coil of wire. But so far we've gained nothing. This ring has 5 turns on this side and 50 turns on this side. When the current emerges from this side, the voltage has been increased by a factor of 10, but the amperage has been decreased by a factor of 10. These transformers change the 23,000 volts at 15,000 amps from the generators inside to 230,000 volts at 1,500 amps for transmission. The high voltage lines arrive at a large substation where the situation is reversed. Here the power is transformed down to a medium high voltage for distribution to your community. Then the lines travel to a small substation in your neighborhood. This one is cleverly disguised as a house. Here the power is dropped further, down to about 4,000 volts, and sent along lines on telephone poles or underground. The last stop is a small transformer on a telephone pole. Here, the power is transformed down to the final voltage that we use at home.
There's one last important piece of the electrical distribution system, your electric meter. In this model, these light bulbs represent the various loads in your house, and a small portion of the current to run them is being shunted through a small electric motor. That electric motor is geared to this pointer. If I draw some current, the motor spins. If I draw more current, the proportion of current through that motor will increase and it spins faster. Inside a real electric meter is an electric motor that's geared to the dials on the front that register how much electricity you've used. They read out in kilowatt hours. That's 1,000 watt hours. It means that if you draw 1,000 watts for 1 hour, the dials will register 1 more kilowatt hour. You can experiment yourself with the various loads in your house. You'll find that a 15-watt light bulb doesn't register hardly anything, but something like a toaster oven, which is 1,500 watts, that's a kilowatt and a half, does register a lot. Something like an electric clothes dryer can be up to 3,000 watts, that's 3 kilowatts. And you may be surprised that a television set or a personal computer can be under 100 watts. Just remember, don't experiment too much. After all, you're paying for everything that registers on those dials.
Ontario